Well, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. We're now at the top of the hour, so I wanted to go ahead and get today's presentation going. We've got about 80 plus folks joining us so far, and I'm sure that we'll have a few more trickle in as we get started. As I said, thanks for taking the time out of your day to join us. I know we've got folks scattered across the U.S. in different time zones and from different walks of life. Today, we're going to be taking a look at what's new and what's coming in FusionPro 14. It's our latest version release. I'm very excited to have Douglas Kogan with us today. For those of you that don't know Douglas, he is actually the creator of FusionPro. He was responsible for writing the first line of code, and he continues to be the product owner and head of development. He's actually going to be the one that's taking you through the presentation today. We're going to be keeping the slide deck to a minimum. What we really want to do is have Doug take you through the system so you can see all the new, latest, and greatest live in action. Also joining us today, I have another gentleman that some of you may know, and if you don't, his name is John Genovese. John is one of our principal consultants for FusionPro and brings 10 plus years of knowledge with the solution to the table. You may hear some snippets from him today. He works with a broad segment of our customers, so I'm sure he'll have a little bit to contribute to today's presentation as well. John, maybe I'll give it over to you. You can say hello to everybody, and then I'll let you turn it over to Doug from there.
Yeah, so listen, I want to thank you all for joining me. And as Robert said, I have worked with many of you in the actual 19 years of being with the product. So it's a product that I know and love and enjoy showing it to our clients and helping wherever I can. I'm not going to take up too much time. I mean, I'm the sales rep here, but at the end of the day, we're not here for that. We're here to hear Doug tell us about what's new and what's coming in our soon to be released version 14. Doug?
All right. Thank you, John. Thank you, Robert. And thank you, everyone who's in attendance. I'm really grateful to have you all here. And as I was preparing this, I was thinking about all the ways I'm grateful for the duration of this product, for all of you who's made it possible. There are people on this call who I've worked with for over 20 years. There are some on the call who are pretty new customers. They're partners, universities that teach FusionPro, colleagues at Rico, and my staff, and a large host of people who are here. And I just want to thank you for being on the journey. In my role, I have a lot of responsibilities. I have a responsibility, of course, to the company to make a product that's profitable for them, which I endeavor to do by making something that is really valuable and it makes it frankly easy to sell. And responsibility to my staff to give them assignments that are, doable but tough and hopefully enjoyable. And frankly, the biggest responsibility I have is to my customers. You've chosen and invested in our product. You've put your faith in us, and I take that responsibility very seriously. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity to, well, first of all, to share that and to meet with you all. And I'm grateful that you're on the journey with us. Big thank you to you all. Okay, and let's get on to the fun stuff that you're here for. Version 14. I mean, this is frankly a bit of a dream come true for some of us on the development team. There are features on here we've been wanting to put in for a number of years, and either we gave it a try and it wasn't quite what we wanted, or our other commitments got in the way. But really, this is focused on more than I think any release we've done in the last decade, focused entirely on usability improvements, making the product easier, making it so you can be more productive, get more done quickly. And I think there's a lot of things here that you're going to be excited about. And so I'm going to rattle these off quickly, and I'm going to demo 5 of them live. And one of the key features here, being able to format a variable without a rule. We've made efforts to make it easier and easier to format variables of dates or capitalization or numbers or things like that. But you still have to make a rule for it. And every different variation, you need to make another rule. So now inline inside of our variable text editor, you can format the variables and indicate their formatting without having to write any rules right inside there. So that's going to be the first thing I'll show. A brand new table GUI. We took a crack at this in our current software to have a GUI to help you define a table. It works for some cases, but a simple table was with just a few entries in it was not terribly easy to do. So we've made a brand new user interface here, and that is easy to make a very small, simple table, and also to make a variable length, fairly complex table, and put a lot of the complexity right into the GUI. To be able to hide some entries in the drop-down list of the fields. I know sometimes the data comes from a big data dump, and there are fields in there that you don't really need to use every day. And so you can pare those down so that only the fields you're actually going to use in your data are there in the list. That make your job easier. The whole imposition tool has been reworked. I will show you that. The chart system largely been overhauled. Several new chart types, and also a lot easier to put in data for simple charts. For our Mac users, you'll be happy to see we finally have a native Mac Silicon M1, M2 plugin. So on the Macintosh, you've had to have Rosetta mode turned on in order for the FusionPro plugin to show up in Acrobat. So you don't need to have Acrobat run in Rosetta anymore. And I've also been told that that really slowed it down. So starting with version 14, you won't need to do that anymore. You'll still need Rosetta for a composition component that is part of the system. The FusionPro Mac plugin talks to another component that's running, I think it's called the composition server, that's local to the Macintosh. And that still needs to run in Rosetta mode. In order to get that out of Rosetta mode, we need to get a new version of the Adobe PDF library. And that introduces some differences. And we take it very seriously that all old jobs, especially in our server, have to run like they used to before we upgraded FusionPro. So if you imagine, like in our MarcomCentral solution, our online portal, that has FusionPro embedded in it. If someone submits a job into there, adds it to a repository, and that product is ordered, it needs to have the output exactly the same as it was yesterday, even if we replace the version of FusionPro underneath. So every time we change the version of the Adobe PDF library, there are some tweaks we have to make sure that that happens. So we didn't do that yet. We're still running the version of the PDF library we've had for a couple versions now. So in order for the Mac to not need any Rosetta at all, we're going to have to update the Adobe PDF library, which we plan later in the calendar year. Found a couple opportunities for some speed improvements in processing strings in JavaScript. We found some improvements there. And also if you've got stacked imposition, we saw some bottlenecks there and found some pretty big speed improvements depending on the job for stacked imposition. And if you've got the designer tool, speaking of imposition, that's the mode where you can compose just one record in order to preview it before you give it to a server. Then that was okay. You could make one record of PDF output, but you could only see one record on an imposed sheet. So if you were testing your imposition in Designer, it wasn't very helpful to get one record on a 12-up imposed sheet. So now if you've got the Designer tool and you're testing your PDF output to an imposed sheet, it will fill, you'll get one record, one sheet will be filled up. We'll compose enough records to fill a sheet. We've got some customers who had some trouble with the QR barcode scanning with actual physical scanners. They work fine with phones. We finally found what we think is the root cause of that. And we have an update to our QR barcodes in order to scan correctly on these scanners, as far as we can tell. And also a few bug fixes, and it's listing the ones that are of particular note. On the duplex imposition, when you discard the bleed, like chop cut, where you're cutting the bleed in between two rows or columns, sometimes that wasn't right on the back of the sheet. That's fixed. On the Mac, on the rules editor, we couldn't use Command C and Command V, Command X, and Command A. You had to use the control version of that due to a defect in the GUI system we were using. We found a workaround for that, so that is now resolved, which I know a lot of people have been hoping for a fix to that for a while. We found a couple cases where if you've got an Excel input file and you're honoring the formatting of the numbers inside of Excel, sometimes it was not rounding exactly the way Excel did, and we have a fix to that. And also, if you're installing over an old version and there's a whole bunch of temp files, it was taking a very long time to install, and we fixed that. So thank you for the development team and my other colleagues who are on the call for making all this happen. Without further ado, I'm going to jump over here to this other computer where I have version 14 installed. So the first thing I'm going to show, here's a data file that we ship with. We have several samples that we ship within the product. And if you don't know about those, you can get them under FusionPro documentation tutorials, and that will open up a folder with several different samples that we have. And the documentation has been updated, especially for the tables, the charts, and the imposition system. And some of those walk through the samples that are installed here and explain how they're made or reference them. And I'll be referencing some of them too. One of the ones we ship with is statement here, and we've had the same statement now for a while. And this has several tables in it, and so we had our existing table system was demoed using this example, and we've got a few charts here, a few tables here where this is just a table of some entries that these are just fields in a given record's worth of data. And then we have a big long variable length table that goes multiple pages. And this has many, many rows of data from the input. So this is the data file that we're going to work with here, where I'm going to demo these new tables and some of these features. Basically, what this is I've got an Excel file, and this row here is the beginning of a person's report, right? The person's data. So this has their name and their address, their current balance, when it's due, and then the list of all their credit card transactions. And now I have another record here. This is the beginning of another record's worth of data here, another person's data. And when the account number changes, see this account number is different here, that means this is a different record of data. So long ago, FusionPro only supported the concept of every line of the Excel file was a record. Now we have we have for a few releases now the notion of a multi-line record job. So I just want to point that out because that's what I'm going to be using in my sample here. And I'm going to fire up Acrobat here on this this other computer. And another feature that we've had for a little bit that a lot of people don't know about here is under Manage Pages, I can just say a new PDF, and I can just say how big it is, and then I can start pointing to it. So I'm going to say I want to point to that Excel spreadsheet that I just talked about, and I want this single sheet file, and I want to say it's multi-line records. And by the way, this allow number format, that is that thing I talked about where I will honor the settings in Excel that say this is how the number or the date is to appear. And if I uncheck that, it'll be the raw data from Excel. And if I check it, it'll come out in the format that is specified in Excel. And it's on by default for all new jobs and off by default for older jobs, but you can turn it on if you want. I'm going to turn on multi-line records here. And by default, it's when the first field changes. And so that actually works out perfectly for us. So when the account number changes, then it's a different record. I could also have said if the last name field is not empty, that's another trigger I could have used for this data, right? Because that entry, right, that column, this last name here, right, this is only not empty here on these rows that begin a new record. So that's another way I could have done it. And there's lots of options here of what you can do, but I'm going to say when the account number changes. Okay, and then here's my data, and it says, I've got, the first two records worth of data here are, it starts with Lena, and, and then record 2 is Danette, and that's exactly right. Okay, so the first thing I want to demonstrate here is the ability to format data inside of my text editor without writing any rules. So I'm going to just bring up my text editor here. Come on. And version 14 hasn't been released yet. This is still a development version. So if I do get any hiccups, well, that's why. We are building our first release candidate today. We'll be testing it over the course of February. Hopefully by the end of the month, we'll say it's ready to go. So that's the intent, is sometime around there, depending what we find in our testing. Okay, so if I edit the text here, I'm going to insert, I'm going to say I want the person's first and last name. I want to say their amount that is due, and their due date. Due date. Okay, there we go. And let's just preview that. See what that looks like. Okay, so that's what we have. Let's not use that due date. Let's just use date. That's the one I meant to do. The date. There we go. That's the one. Okay, so that's the way it looks right now. And I can say, all right, I want actually this to be uppercase. So I can just say I want this to be in the form case, uppercase, and last name I want to format uppercase. So I just push this new format button when I have a variable selected, and then I can choose from a number of formats that are, they were already available in a rule that said format a field and return it. But now I can just push the format button, and I can say here, I want this amount. This is going to be currency, 2 decimal places, put in the commas, put a dollar sign in front. And notice it puts a little asterisk to say this is a formatted rule. And if I don't want it anymore, I can just format it. I can switch back to none, and then that goes away. But I'll just say I want this uppercase. And then the date, I can say format the date, and I'm going to say I want it with the word spelled out like that. All right, and now if I go back to my preview, and now there you go. This is capitalized. This is formatted as with the dollar sign, and this is with it spelled out like so. So there we go. Just like that, I'm able to pretty easily format my data. Okay, so the other thing I want to do is show, because this is one of the things I really wanted to fix, is to make a static table like this, which is just 4 rows, 2 columns, some static text, and then 4 variables that come from the data, right? That come from variables here in the variable text editor. So you don't need to have like a multi-line record for that table. This can just be a regular old Excel. Every line is its own record kind of format. And so I want to make sure that the new table GUI could do this pretty easily. Okay, so the first thing I want to say is this job has some colors in it that I like. And the colors that I'm, have by default are just these basic colors, and I don't want that. So I want to import my colors from the other template. And this is another feature we've had for a long time, this import. And you can import lots of things. So like I could pull in the frames from another job into this blank PDF that I made and pull in the variable layout and the colors. Now I just want the colors from this other job, but I could pull in all of the frames from a different job. So, and I just point to the file that I want, and I've got this table GUI sample that I added to the system. And this is saying, well, you already had some colors of these names, but we're gonna replace them. And so now my colors, I've got a whole bunch of more colors that come from that job. So cool. All right, so now I want to define a new table. So if I go to my rule editor here, I've got a new table rule wizard that's here, and I've got this. I use this word, and my family makes fun of me that I'm from another time. But I look at this and I just have to say this is nifty, a nifty table editor here. So it's kind of like Excel. So I want to have a table that is got 4 rows and 2 columns. And in this case, these are just going to be body rows. So this by default has 1 header, 1 body, and 1 footer row. So the header row, basically, if this table repeats, if it flows from one frame to another frame, either inserting additional pages or its connected frames, it will repeat the header and it will repeat the footer in each iteration of the table. But if your table fits into one frame, you don't really need either. So I can say I want to just delete these 2, and I want to delete these 3 columns. I only want 2. So I held down Shift there and pushed that to select 3 columns. I'm going to say I want to delete these 3 columns like that. And then, so this table GUI has 2 modes. I'm editing cells, and here's the formatting that apply to individual cells. And here's a formatting that applies to the whole table. And here I'm going to say I want to insert 3 body rows. Now I've got my four rows and two columns. And so if you remember the table that I want to make, it's this one right here, this amount due date, amount after delinquent date, and account number. So those are the headers I want, and those are the values I want. And so what I can do, actually, I could pick individual cells, and here in the cell edit, I can choose like the background color here and pick the formatting and such. But I can also, at the table level, say, I want to highlight this by rows, and I want the first one to be this Jensen blue, and the second one I want to be this light blue, like that. And then I can highlight this row and say I want it to be Arial, narrow, bold, white, 11 points. And then this one also Arial, narrow, bold, white, 11 points. And then I can just type it in here. And in fact, let me do that so I can see it down there. So, so I wanted to say amount due. And by default, these are horizontally centered there and vertically in the middle, but you can change that. You can select multiple cells and change them, or just do individual cells. And then this is due date. This one says amount if late. And I guess I didn't say I wanted bold. I forgot to do bold. There we go. And account number. Okay. And now, in order to insert variables into here, I push this little T button, and that brings up my variable text editor. And now I can just insert variables like I'm used to. So this is the amount due, which is, I think that's total due here. And here I can format it. I can say I want this to be, this guy that we did. So now that's formatted like so. And then likewise the due date. And I think that's already formatted the way I want, if memory serves. The amount if late is, see, it's due if late. And then the account number is just that. Okay, and I should give it a role name. This will be, let's say, the accounts table, like so. And then I can, oops, you know what, well, I'll show you what that looks like, and then I'll show you the button I should have pushed to give me better results. But I can then just insert the accounts table where I wanted, and then we'll turn our preview back on. Okay, and that doesn't quite fit, right? It's a little bit too wide. And I wanted to have my white grid. I forgot to put my white grid on. So if I go to my rules here again, and I can just bring that up to edit. And in the table edit, there's a neat option here to say stretch the columns, or in this case, squeeze the columns to fit the frame width. So I just turn that on and it will fit. And in that case, the size of these columns really just become ratios. If this is twice as wide as this, or if this is 2 inches and that's 1 inch, then when you squeeze it in here, it'll say this is twice as wide as that. And that's really all there is to it. And I can resize them. I can resize them here, or in the cell edit, if you notice, this is where it says what the size is. So I can also very precisely type in my size right there. And this is also for like a minimum row height. I can put that in here to say, now ordinarily this is just the height as is appropriate for the amount of content that's in here, plus whatever margins you have. But you can also say, and no less than a certain amount. Okay, and the other thing I can say is for the style for the whole table, I want grid marks on the inside, white, and half a point. So I'm in here in the grid lines group, right? So the little indicator here at the bottom tells you, this is the data shading group, the grid lines, your input. By the way, the input for this table is none. I have no input. And I'll talk about the other input formats in just a second. This is another neat new feature. It used to be for tables, you could only specify the lines are like thin or super thin or thick or medium. But now you can do, exactly the size of the point that you want. And this is for the entire table. I can also here on a cell select individual grid lines, through here for the margins or the border, which is the gap in between. Okay, so now that I've turned those two things on, let's see how the table looks now. Yeah, okay. So that's pretty close to the example that I had. And once you get the hang of it, making a table like that is pretty straightforward. So if we take a look here at this table that is with the sample, so this is for multiple lines of data here in the table, and the way you make that is, now if you remember, I specified this job as a multi-line record input file format. So when I say I want a new table, and this will be the transactions table. Okay, then and I actually want five columns. How handy. The input to this is the multi-line records. So this will loop through the lines of the multi-line record and insert a body row for every line of it. So I can specify my header and I can specify my footer. Now actually I don't have a footer on this table, so I'm just going to get rid of that. And all right, roll off the screen. Delete that footer. Okay. So the data it's pre-filled in. It says this is the data that's going to come from that, that the multi-line records of the data. And I want to make this a little bit bigger. Actually, the one I really want bigger is, I kind of messed that up, is that one. That's the one I want bigger. Okay. Although I want that a little bigger than the default. Come on. There we go. And the description, if you remember, was a little bit bigger. All right, and so again, I want this to be Arial narrow, 11-point bold, white. And that's for that header row. And I want to then specify the fields for these cells. So let's bring this back up so I can see the output. I can never remember. So it's the date, type, description, amount, and category. So I'll put that there so I can see it. Okay, so now I just click on the column and I say what field I want. So I want the date, the type, the description, the amount, and the category. Okay, and amount I want formatted. So again, I can format these, and there's my handy formatting dialog we've come to know and love. So I can say I want this to be in dollars, and so it shows here how it's formatted, give a little helper thing. And I want this column to be on the right. I want the description to be on the left. I could format the date if I want, or the category, but the category is just text. I could capitalize it. And I want the border. Sorry, I want it on the table border. I want that same one with the inside and the white. I want the rows to be highlighted, medium blue and light blue. Stretch to fit the frame. Okay, am I missing anything? Oh, yeah, I wanted the header to be not the text. I want the header to be filled with the Jensen blue. and but the text is white. Okay, so that's the transactions table. So let's see how I did. All right. And there it is. All right, and this red line means, okay, I don't fit here. And then I could say, for this frame, I want to overflow to additional pages, and that's how I say. I want to overflow, and if I have other pages, I can overflow to that. And then this red line becomes blue. But you see here, this is our table. So it wasn't very much work. Now, if your data is a different format, where and I've got a sample of this in the tutorials. If the data is of such where it's not like this, where it's a person's name and then all their transactions. Instead, it's in two sheets or a different file altogether, where it's just one line for every person and with their account number, and all their transactions are in another sheet. Then I have a sample of how you do that. That's the multi-sheet example. That's with the system. And the way you would do that is for the transactions table, you would just change your input to be what's called a data source. So you'd set up a secondary data source, an external data file, and then you would point to it that way. And the same thing where you would pick the fields from that source, like so. You can also specify a rule that would bring in the data so that I could be combining multiple things together in order to compute what the value should be for the tables. And then I can use a rule that would return that. So those are the different kinds of inputs that I would have. And by the way, let's say that I wanted to put more than one column of data, or more than one field's worth of value in one of these columns. So here I've got type and a description as two separate columns. So what if I just said I want to get rid of one of these, and here in the description, I want to instead put two things. So I can push the little button above fields here, and then I can say description, and in parentheses say I have a type. I want the type to be inserted there as well. Then it looks like this. So I can put more than one thing in this table. And I put in literal text, right? I put in the parentheses here. Oh, and a couple other things that I missed, that it automatically filled in the header with the names of the fields, which I could do. It did it automatically. But if, here I wanted it to actually say the word amount, right? So I could just type the word amount and it would override it, right? So then it'll say amount here instead of AMT, like that. And by the way, I put in my slide at the beginning the feature to turn off, hide some of the fields if I don't need them, and then I forgot to show how to do it. So my apologies. Here in the data definition tool, in the input options, where a lot of people don't go, and edit fields where even fewer people go, really the only benefit of this is to really say I want a field to be called a graphic field instead of a text field, which would allow it to be used as a drop down inside of a graphic frame directly without having to make a rule. But another thing you can do in this dialog now is you can say what fields I want to hide, because I'm not going to actually use them in my job. And if you're actually going to hide most of them, you can actually push this button to hide all of them, and then just pick the few that you want to actually use. So like so. That would have been helpful actually when I was doing my work, and I kind of went and forgot about it. Now, if I go into here, my drop-down list is much shorter. So that can be helpful. Like, I know sometimes people get data like from a database, and it's like the IT team just kind of gives a whole data dump of everything, and it's just an unwieldy, huge amount of data. Now you can go through and you can control that, and you don't have to wade through dozens and dozens of fields that you don't care about. So let's see. I think that was what I wanted to show. Let me just bring up the table GUI again quickly to make sure I didn't forget anything I didn't want to highlight right there. But I think those are the big things that I wanted to show. Yeah, I think this is a major improvement. And yeah, I've got a sample of how to do a rule-based table in one of my other samples. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this preview off for now. And let's take a look at another sample that we ship with. So if I look at the documentation and the tutorials, the other big thing we did is improvements for charting. So I'm going to show here. So I've got a data file here where I've got by state, the list of teams. This is for high school sports, the number of teams for that sport, and the number of players that are in that sport for a whole bunch of sports. And I gleaned a whole bunch of data off of here, but we're only going to take a look at a few of the sports. So let me turn preview on and see what we're going to make here. So I've got a little table that shows this information and two charts that show it. So if I take a look at this, this is a chart frame. So I drew it by using the chart frame tool, and then I picked my format. And so the first thing you'll notice is that there's some new formats here. So we have this new donut format and this new radar type format. And in addition, we added a lot of features to each of them. But like for this donut chart, you see what I've done here is I've specified the radius. So 30% of the radius of the pie chart has been thrown away to make the donut hole. And then 20% of what's left is shaded to be a little bit darker color to make this kind of 3D effect here. I've got a border of white, which is making this like so. And then here I can say for each slice how I want it formatted. And I've got an inside, an outside, and an out of bounds. So the inside is what's going to go in the chart inside the slice. So here I've got a little drop down here of what can go in here. So I'm saying I want the percentage of the value of the total that this is representing rounded. So in this case, 20% instead of a fractional exact amount. And then I can format this. I can highlight this and say I want this to be white here. And since that's white, in order to be able to see it, I've got these little controls here that says this is just changing the shading of this control. That way, you can see the white text here. And so on the inside, I want the percent, and on the outside, I want the label. And I've got the label just here like so. And then out of bounds is, well, what if there's not enough room in the slice, like this tennis one here? There's not enough room for all that stuff. Then it's going to go outside, and it lets you indicate how you want that to be formatted. So I want that to be the label and the percent rounded and the percent sign afterwards. So this percent sign is just some literal text that was typed after the percent rounded variable that got inserted. So I could insert any of these, or I could just type in literal text. I could also put like this in parentheses, like so. I could do that instead. And then like here where I say lines, that's like whether or not there's a line that goes from this label to the edge of the pie chart, and then what color you want that to be. But in this case, I just put the text near it, and it's kind of obvious. And yeah, I can have a title. I can have a legend. Now I don't need any legend because I'm putting everything right here on the on the outside, but I could insert into the legend exactly what I want into there too. I could say I want the label or the percent sign or the value inserted into here. I have control over it. And also what the little symbol is that goes next to the legend. By default, it's that diamond, but you can pick somewhere you can just type in, like with Wingdings, type in a custom character here. Now, this is a major new improvement to the charts. You used to always have to write a rule that would put in the values of the chart. Now, in this case, this is only a small number. I've only have 6 things that I want to put in this chart. So I've got a little data edit, control here. So I can just type in here. I just typed in the word baseball, right? That's what this is, the label for. And then I've got the variable here, and I've got a little drop-down list of all the fields in the data. So that is how I inserted this into here. So if I wanted to, instead of wrestling, I wanted to put in, hockey, I could put in, the number of hockey players here instead, hockey players like that. And then I could just type in hockey. So that way I can easily make a table when I have a certain number of fields that I want to represent here, and I can just type in the text and select the variables. Now, if this was, 50 or 100 or 200 or, any sizable amount, there's ways to write rules to do this instead. But if you have a small number and you've got somebody on your team who's, not into JavaScript, they can just do this and insert this, and really this only takes a couple minutes to just enter in, a dozen entries here of names and text. You can also copy and paste some of this from Excel. You can't get these, these field names from Excel because that's, built into FusionPro. But basically that's how that was done. And so here it is by players, and this is the same thing, by teams instead of by players, right? I have in the same heading, but I've got teams instead. And so that's the difference here. And another thing that we have, I didn't talk about this variable thickness, and what that does is that changes the size of each pie slice to represent the amount, in addition to its width. I guess these are all kind of close to each other. I've got a better example, but it makes this smaller relative to the other ones to show, this one is smaller than that, in addition to it being narrower here. And I've got a table here. So the only rule I think in this job is the rule to make this table, which is also just a static table where I've just typed in these words and entered these variables in here, the number of teams. Now, one thing that I did do, though, is notice I've got two header rows, and I just have the word number of here, and then teams and players in these different cells, and the word sport here, and I merged the cells together. So, originally, so if I unmerge everything, well, now it looks like this, which is kind of silly, right? But what I did was I said I wanted to, merge together these two cells, this sport, which I want to, merge them, and merge these four. So I'm holding down the control key and selecting multiple here and saying merge them. There we go. Okay, now that's merged together, and that I think should bring me back to, oops, I messed that all up. Okay, well, like I said, it's not quite ready yet, but I don't know what I did. There. I merged too much. Too much merging. Guess I'll just come back to that guy. Let me revert this fellow. But the other thing that I did was I also highlighted the I highlighted this column and said it was filled. And I can say if this was data shaded, I can turn off the data shading here, and I can override the data shading to make this gold. So I was able to highlight that column and say, here's my data shading. Okay, and also I ship with a collection of other table samples that, let me show you that. And so there's a variety here, and this is ships with the product. So here, like I have the border on of the same color, or I say I have the text of the description on the outside to be the color of the slice, options like that, different varieties. Here's a better example of that with the variable length thickness here of the table. Sorry, of the donut slice. So here's with the border being black, which gives a kind of striking look to it. All sorts of options for how you want to display it. There's the old-fashioned way where we just have the label, the legend on the outside here, and I can change, that shape of that legend. So I can also pick a font and pick a hand. Oh, I want that one. So I can pick a different symbol there. See a water drop. So you can do something like that. You can pick your symbol that you want. And if you have your radius really, really large, you can get all kinds of dramatic looks like that. Like that's a pretty interesting looking chart. It's big enough you can put your title in the middle. Another example of that. And then there's another chart type that we picked where you can choose. This is a radar chart, and I think the data here is just entered in. So this is the radar type here, and you can say how much I want to offset the text from the little icon here from its data point, and how thick these lines should be. And I can just edit. Again, I just typed in some numbers here, but these could be variables, or there could be a rule that brings it in. And then some other options here too is like if my data is very large, I can put in a number that I can divide all. Like these are all like in the millions or hundreds of thousands, this data. And I can say I've got a divisor. So I'm dividing everything by 1,000. And so I said sales in thousands here. And I can also specify my increments here for my lines. So I have just the major grid lines on. Now it's computing it to put it at 2,000, but I could change this number and say I want it at 5,000s or something like that. That's another feature that's new. Both of these divisor and increment are new, in addition to the whole notion of all these changes to the pie and the donut and the radar. The radar is completely new. Oh, and then here's if I have a rule. So this is the the way where I could just generate a table like so. This is all hard coded data, but I could be getting this data from from the fields of the data. And in fact, I have another example of that here. So this chart sample I showed you the sports participation from variables, and I have another one where the sports participation comes from rules, where I've got rules for both for the chart data, where it generates data that looks like this by just looping through and generating a list, or my sports table data, where I get the data and I can generate it. So where it's coming from, and that can be coming from fields within the data set that's coming in. So if you want to filter some out or do some math, and in fact the statement sample, the new statement sample from the table GUI. So we redid the statement sample here. The statement sample 1 file from the table GUI. This has a chart in it as well. And so this is walking through all the values in the data and figuring out which category each one belongs to, and then summing it up. So if I take a look here, I've got a rule. So this whole system now, it only has these tables. This whole sample now just has these 5 tables that are part of the job, and then one JavaScript rule that loops through all the data and then adds it up, sums it up by category here, throws away anything that's less than 1%. We don't want those, and it just does this math on it. And then we don't really care about what the totals are. We just feed those totals to the chart GUI here, and it just says, this is 23%, that's 34%, highlights it and labels it like so. Okay, we're just about out of time, and one of the other major features I wanted to show is we completely revamped the imposition GUI tool. Now we redid this GUI, depending on how long you've been with us. This is a little bit of my new Coke moment here, not to date myself, but the imposition tool used to look like this long ago, and some years ago we redid it to look more stylish, and we thought, oh, this will be so much easier to use and more interesting looking. And I admit it was just too many clicks. It was too much scrolling around with the old tool, having to find all the different settings and turn them on and off. So we basically stepped back and redid it again, much like the way it used to look. So everything for the imposition is on this one screen, except for your signature, which probably you don't change very often. Simplex or duplex or tumble duplex, some of these more sophisticated imposition options here, but you're probably going to pick one of these 3, and everything else is here. So the size of the finished piece, which you can of course get from your actual PDF file by loading it up, turning your crop marks on and off, and then here's your layout, how much your stack is, how many across, how many down. And this is the feature, by the way, that I talked about, where I can discard the gap here between 2, and if the tops of these postcards were the same solid color, I could rotate this row 180 degrees so these heads abut each other, and then I can cut right across and reduce the number of cuts that I have. And so that if you had that on a duplex job, sometimes the output wasn't right and you had to put the gap back. And so that's also a bug that's fixed, but also we're using this new GUI to help you to see that. I think that's the end of my list of features I was going to demo, kind of right on the dot. And yeah, thank you for the team that put this all together, did all this work, and of course continue to support our large base of customers, and the testers who are testing all this, and our support team, and all my colleagues at my company who helped to make this a reality. I think you're going to really like these new features. I think it's going to make your life a lot easier. Looking forward to your feedback about it. And of course, not the end of the road. So if I missed a feature, I'm eager to hear what you have to say. And I don't know, Robert, do we have a couple minutes for some questions, or did I used up every last second here, I think, but.
We do have a few minutes left. We've actually got 4 minutes in looking at the clock. I know that some folks have been submitting some questions in the chat and the Q&A, and that one of our colleagues, Dan Korn, has been answering quite a few of those. So folks, if you do have some more questions, we do have the mics muted, but please feel free to enter those into the Q&A portion or into the chat, and we'll be happy to address those. Doug, was there any final comments you wanted to add as we give folks a few minutes here to enter any questions they may have? One comment I will make is, I know there have been some questions in there. In case anyone didn't see my comment, we will be sending out a recording of this that you can use for reference or share with team members. It'll probably be a couple days before we have that available for you.
Yeah, I think the only other thing, other than my gratitude for everybody who's on the call again, and for sticking with us for all these years, or if you're brand new, we're grateful to have you. And if you have been a long-term customer, we are offering a few opportunities to beta test this. So reach out to FusionPro support, and we'll let you know if you're one of the lucky dozen or so that we're going to give a pre-release of version 14 to. We're making the production candidate today, and we're going to continue to test it and refine some things, but we're eager to have people take a look at it. Please don't use it for anything in production though, because it's not released yet.
Hey, Doug.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, can you speak to making a QR code with the graphic and then how you're able to resize? A question came in, can you make a
Yeah.
QR
Yeah.
code larger than 1 inch?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll show you that quick. Let's see here. Let's see how can I most quickly do this. Here's my untitled one. Okay, so let's make some room here. So I'm gonna make a new QR graphic barcode. QR barcode. And you can just answer, so I'll just put the account number here. You can also make a rule that combines multiple things together. And I can say, I think I can just pick all my default options here. So it's going to be called QR barcode. And I think I just draw a graphic frame. I'm going to associate the graphic barcode to it. And I think that's all I have to do. Yeah, made a huge barcode.
Yep.
Now
So there you go.
there's very little data in that, so it's enormous, right? But if I had a large amount of data, then the squares would be smaller, and it would,
Yeah, and if you resize the graphic frame, that will resize the barcode. So when when you were using a font, you had to go in and say what the font size was, and try to figure it out. But this just resizes with the frame.
Right. Yeah, you can put it wherever you want. We've had customers with various levels of success too, of just drawing another graphic right on top of it and putting a logo. You've seen that in QR barcodes. If you have your error correction level high enough, it will basically, you're throwing away some of the data in the middle of the barcode and counting on the error corrector to figure it out. So you can do that. You can just draw another graphic frame and over top of this and put another logo in. People have been interested in that kind of thing. We are exploring the notion too of replacing these boxes with like dots, making this more rounded. We're looking into that. So we would like to add that in the future. That definitely something we want.
I think that looks like most of the questions, Doug. I know that you can't have visibility into that since you're presenting. One comment I would make to folks, I'm sure a lot of times as you leave these types of presentations, there are some questions that come up after the fact. Please feel free to reach out to us. We're more than happy to have that one-on-one conversation and dig a little bit deeper into the details with you. But Doug, I think that looks like all the questions for today. If you'd like to go ahead and wrap up our call, and John, if you have any last closing comments, we'll go ahead and let everybody get back to their day. I would like to remind everyone again that we will be sending a recording out, so you'll have this for reference.
Yeah. Doug, I did see one more question. It's relevant to the imposition, and it's asking about Dutch cut. Anything on that front?
Yeah. So now that we've redone the GUI, that was kind of step one. We can explore some other options. We do have a way that you can, not using the imposition per se, but to draw multiple frames on a page that are not. So the question is not to have a rectangular grid here like so, but like several that go this direction, several that go that direction. I do have an option of where you can draw multiple frames on a page and use the a layout to insert into it. It's a little tricky, but if the person who asked that question sends a note to FusionPro support and say, I'm the person who asked about that, and then we can connect and I can show you what we have. It does take a little bit of JavaScript and some extra work to make happen, but if it's important enough, we do have a way to do it. Now that we've redone this GUI, thinking about some other imposition options we could do, but we can't do it right now.
And another point to note, if you're seeing something up here that like that, wow, I need that, but it's still too complicated, I've got a customer kind of thing, we have a whole team of folks that can write, advanced templates for you. So reach out on the FusionPro page. There is a services drop down. You can click that and put your name in, and we'll get back to you and get people involved that can help you with your projects.
All right, cool. Thank you very much for your time, your sticking with us, your support. And yeah, I know I see a lot of people on here that I've worked with for a number of years, and great to see you again. And if you're new, great to know you.
Yes, thank you for joining today, everyone. We really appreciate your time. Take care and have a great rest of the week.
Bye, everyone.